So, we're continuing on with the Andrea Giesbrecht story. Um, I don't even know what to say. She's got less than 10 years. Um, Seems that she may have murdered 6 babies, or upwards around close to that amount, if not pretty much guaranteed, but the way our justice system works, if you can't prove that the babies were born alive, then you can't prove that they were murdered. Um, so just being a heinous baby killer, um, I think she cashed in on a little bit of privilege, got a bit of a slap on the wrist for it, and we will continue. So, when looking at similar cases on which to base the sentence, the justice said most involved young women without permanent partners, often experiencing pregnancy for the first time, who disposed of only one child. Some of these cases involved women diagnosed with mental health issues. Andrea Giesbrecht is not that person. She is an outlier, a very different member of a particular group of women who concealed the bodies of children they delivered. Giesbrecht reported she does not have a history of mental illness and has never been diagnosed with any psychiatric disorders. By disposing of 6 bodies, Giesbrecht is unprecedented as an offender in the context of the section of the Criminal Code of Canada. But her lawyer, Greg Brodsky, said he was surprised at the severity of the sentence and said his client didn't kill anyone. So, she disposed of 6 infants' remains in a Winnipeg U-Haul storage locker and was to return home shortly after she won her appeal, reducing her prison sentence in 2019. She was ordered released. Greg Brodsky said after the panel of Manitoba judges reduced her original 8.5 sentence to 3 years. Giesbrecht was sentenced in 2017. She was found guilty of disposing of the infant's remains. She appealed the convictions and the sentence. The panel of judges dismissed the appeal of her conviction, but allowed for the other portion, shortening her sentence by more than 5 years. In this decision, the justice called the case deeply disturbing, but said the original sentence assumed Giesbrecht was guilty of actions for which she was never tried or convicted. We will never know why these 6 little lights went dark due to the accused's appalling dishonesty, he wrote. However, just as the mighty are not above the law, the unpopular are not outside of its protections, even on facts troubling as here. Giesbrecht's new sentence was based on 6 months imprisonment on each of 6 counts of concealing the body of a child contrary to the criminal code, for a total of 3 years less time served. So her statutory release date was set as January 27, 2019 as a result of the appeal. Offenders in Canada who aren't serving life sentences are released from prison on statutory release after they've served 2/3 of their sentences. They must follow certain conditions, including reporting to a parole officer and remaining within geographic boundaries. So Giesbrecht's full sentence ended on the following November. So her lawyer, Greg Brodsky, said Giesbrecht was ordered released from an institution in Atlantic, Canada, but remained there until a flight could be arranged for her return to Manitoba. And a sentence of 8.5 years is reduced to go home, he said. It's terrific. Look, you gotta give a dog his due. Greg Brodsky ate this thing. He ate it. You might say I've hated on the man here or there, on an episode here or there. As you shift on the scale of pigment, his effort seems to kind of differ some, but you have to look at the facts of the cases too. If you throw him a mutt, he's not really going to chew on it. If you give him some he can fight, he will gnaw away at the case, sink the teeth and start, cleaving the flesh from the bone of the case. And, you know, on this one, the man was a pit bull. The man was a bulldog. And he ate it. He ate the case, devoured it. He's dabbing his shit off with the napkin after, and he said, "Sweetheart, it's time to go home to your kids and your husband, to resume the lifestyle that you lead as a free woman, back in Winnipeg, right back at it, right back amongst us. As soon as the first flight, we can get you." So the justice said, you know, this is to his knowledge, the longest for an offender convicted of these charges, and the charge itself is even just rarely prosecuted. This isn't even a big deal. Like, you know, like, if babies' corpses being kept and women are disposing of infants, like, we don't really view that as an issue. Sometimes we put people in jail, but certainly not for, you know, I don't know, six infant corpses. I don't think nobody's ever really done 5 years or anything crazy like that. So yeah. Apparently he called the circumstances of the case nothing short of surreal. So Giesbrecht, who was a married mother of 2, lived an unassuming suburban life while she concealed 6 pregnancies. After hidden deliveries, she stored the bodies of the near or full-term infants until they were discovered in 2014. So it's a mystery how each of the children died and why the accused decided to conceal the bodies, Maynella wrote. So it is true. We don't know how the children ended up dead, but they did, and seems pretty self-evident that they were murdered. However, it can't be proven. If you can hide a murder long enough and you murder a victim that's young enough, then no murder took place. That's the way the law is written. So, and, you know, we got to protect abortion rights and everything else, right? Like, it's her right to murder babies. Like, yeah, even if she gave birth to them. Like, her body, her choice, her baby, her choice. You know, and she needs guys. So, yeah, she's not guilty of any foul play to living children, only crimes of deceit relating to their remains. Significant degree of planning and deliberation, not an insignificant financial resources devoted to it. But with the rarity of offenses, he didn't really see any guidance to the sentencing. The fact that there are several bodies concealed in a methodical way, he just wrote that the judge erred in delivering a sentence too high for the conviction, rather than saying what should have been done. So, many may say that no prison term is too long when any grotesque indignity is committed against the child, particularly when it occurs on a large scale, as happened here. However, the courts do not dispense punishment based purely on perceptions, even if reasonably held, as to the moral repugnance of certain behavior. No issue. What's the problem? Everybody keeps wondering, what is the issue? Canadian abortion history begins in 1976. First, the Queen, where the Supreme Court of Canada originally overturned Morgan Taylor's acquittal. Dr. Morgan Taylor was charged with a criminal offense because he performed abortion procedures for women in need. At the time of the case, there was criminal provision in the section of the criminal code which stated everyone who, with intent to procure the miscarriage of a female person, whether or not she is pregnant, uses any means for any purpose of carrying out his intention, is guilty of indictable offense and is liable to imprisonment for life. So at that time, abortion was legal in Canada. And then any female who's pregnant that, you know, tries to do this is liable for imprisonment of 2 years if she gets an abortion. So Those were held as criminal to protect fetuses back then. Since then, um, you know, the case is relying on the implied Bill of Rights because the Charter of Rights infringement would not be enacted for another 4 years. So although Morgan Taylor, the abortionist, lost this case, it became the beginning cornerstone for jurisprudence that now deals with abortion in Canada. So while the focus in the U.S. was on the right to abortion in Roe v. Wade, Canada instead found the criminal code abortion legislation was wholly unconstitutional, and former subsection 251, section 4 of the criminal code specified that only women that were approved by a therapeutic abortion committee would be allowed an abortion. Then 12 years later, in 1988, we have that Morgan Taylor case where Dr. Morgan Taylor was charged under the criminal code for abortion provision. He successfully argued that violated Charter Section 7 because it was banned, because it banned abortion, all except those who were committee approved. The inconsistencies of the procedures of the therapeutic abortion committees meant that different women across the country would receive varying treatment, scrutiny, and different criteria would be applied, thus engaging in infringing in Section 7 of the Charter, right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. So the concern was that this eugenics agenda in which people would determine if you get an abortion or not based on race or socioeconomic situation. So they kind of said, look, either everybody gets them or nobody gets them. You can't just be picking and choosing. So after that, it was decriminalized. So the legislation could not infringe on a woman's ability to seek out the best medical practices for her own body. It was a victory for women nationwide. So after that 88 decision, there were some attempts by provincial legislators to limit access to abortions. The Nova Scotia government attempted to pass legislation, and claimed the provincial government was fighting the privatization of healthcare to prevent abortions. They ultimately held these regulations were outside provincial legislation jurisdiction. Cases ended in 1993. The Supreme Court of Canada decided to strike down the entire act and regulation, deciding that the Nova Scotia government was acting outside of their jurisdictional purview. So these Canadian cases are an essential reminder that women's choices and bodily integrity regarding abortion are subject to the Charter, both provincially and federally. The Canadian courts continue to affirm women's access to abortion after 1993. Cases like Winnipeg Family Services versus DFG recognize that. And the court cannot make decisions for the fetus without making decisions for the woman. After the ruling in Morgan Taylor and the Canadian government decided to pass an amendment to the criminal code, that was defeated in Senate. Successive governments have declined to attempt to pass any other abortion legislation. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had said he would not pass legislation providing a right for abortion. Concerned that future governments, courts could roll it back. Instead, the current government is focused on ensuring equitable access to abortion. So he didn't want to even touch it. He said, no, that might somehow mess it up. Like, we're making sure everybody can get abortions here. So, apparently, the country has seen significant access crisis in rural and indigenous communities, as well as certain provinces. The Human Rights Commissioner reported noted lack of access to abortion in Canada and called on the government to redress inequalities and waiting lists for almost all services, including abortions, because they've become beyond sustainable. As the discussion continues, we should remember that the fight to access abortion is not without its own sacrifices. Dr. Morgan Taylor and similar doctors were forced to face public repercussions fighting for women's access to abortion. Dr. Megan Taylor endured death threats and bombings from the public. Dr. Ramalis, a gynecologist who provided women seeking abortion with safe procedures, was a victim of attacks, which cost him his life. In 1993, in Canada, we continue not to currently have constitutional rights to abortion after 1993. However, Canada follows a different path from the U.S. with abortion being decriminalized. In the U.S., overturning Wade and Casey has drastically changed the legislative landscape, resulting in more power afforded to individual states, many of which have or will make abortion procedures illegal in America. We're going to have a lot to say in conclusion on this one. Look, before I get into that, me personally, women's rights, hey, like, certain situations, of course, definitely no-brainers. Other situations, you know, maybe you could be a bit more responsible. This particular situation, I don't think we need to confuse this with abortion rights. Like, she had double-digit amounts of abortions. I guess she just didn't want to be bothered with having abortions anymore, so she was just carrying the babies the full term. Maybe she didn't discover some of the pregnancies soon enough and wasn't going to be able to get an abortion anyways. I don't want to speculate, but I don't really feel like Andrea Giesbrecht's case has anything to do with women's rights or abortion. That's my personal stance on the situation. So there's no moral high ground when it comes to murder. There are simply certain circumstances under which everyone is compelled to kill. And there are instances where people find themselves in these circumstances. For Andrea Giesbrecht, there is no proof that she killed any of the 6 babies whose corpses she improperly disposed of. Logically, it still remains all but a certainty that she killed every single one of them. Most likely suffocation, given there were no broken bone types of harsh physical injuries detected on the remains. Perhaps she tried birthing them directly into water. She had more than enough attempts to refine her methodology, whatever it may have been for her. The motivating factor to kill was a loathsome hatred of being a mother to her own children. An obstetrics and gynecology expert testified Giesbrecht was pregnant at least 18 times between the ages of 20 and 38. A total of 18 babies. She begrudgingly kept 2. Giesbrecht had 10 therapeutic abortions, which were 9 abortions and 1 miscarriage, and gave birth to the remaining 6 infants who were born at full term and died, whose remains she kept hidden in a storage locker. 16 of the 18 babies that she was pregnant with did not survive. 16. It would appear that the baby's deaths was always intentional, or in at least something that was strongly desired on behalf of the mother. One cannot help but ask themselves, why? It may be that she was unable to arrange therapeutic abortion in time to rid herself of the 6 kids whose remains she concealed. Why not use birth control? She was getting pregnant every single year until shortly before her capture. People really do not like Casey Anthony for the presumption that her misleading of law enforcement is indicative of her involvement in her daughter's death in the case of Casey Anthony and the daughter Haley. She's blaming Zanny the nanny and whatever else, and she was not convicted of anything. She faced little to no legal consequences. Now you can multiply that by 16. It's intentionally. It's amazing that a human body can even produce 18 pregnancies. Was she inducing these pregnancies intentionally with fertility treatments? She isn't saying a single thing. Her husband is as clueless as they come. Most would be hesitant to believe this story was even true were it not taking place in Winnipeg. The topic of abortion can be very divisive. There are strong beliefs on all sides of the issue. It could be argued that 1 or 2 abortions over the course of a woman's life is within a reasonable course of life. You know, birth control failures, just perhaps not being ready to be a mother. This situation seems to be something that went beyond the reasonable amount of terminated pregnancies that a woman might expect to encounter naturally in the course of life. The woman was gambling, getting pregnant, aborting pregnancies, committing frauds. That was what she was into in life. It's a very unique situation. Jeffrey Dahmer killed 17 men, generally viewed as a monster. Those 17 men got to live some of their lives. Andrea Giesbrecht killed 16 before they had a chance to live. Baby killer is not a label worn seamlessly by most. There appeared to be no shame in Andrea's game. She would divulge some pregnancies to friends. She had no remorse for anything she'd done. She may have gotten pregnant several times since her release as well. There's really nothing anyone can do about that. This is Canada. She is free to get as many abortions as she wants. The key word being free. These abortions were all done on the dime of the Canadian taxpayer, and by all indications there is enough of a majority of Canadians who wouldn't have it any other way. All that can be said for Andrea Giesbrecht is that she has proven and been proven guilty of committing the concealment of corpses. She hasn't been proven of committing any murders of anyone. She has more or less openly taken 16 lives and gotten away with it. 6 of them she kept the remains. Many people believe that a woman deserves the right to kill as many of her babies as she chooses. The attempted vasectomy with the lack of any follow-up is perhaps some type of assurance that at least her husband may not be fathering any more babies for her to abort. For now, this is just another story of another lady from Winnipeg doing what she felt best. She's free in society, and as far as the law is concerned, she's done her time. Winnipegology.